Walker, and I'm founder of a small organization on the interwebs called Living Resilience. And if you're watching this video, it's likely in one of two places. One is we're posting it on our podcast, which is called The Poetry of Predicament, and it's a YouTube channel. So welcome. And if you are there on the YouTube channel and you're checking us out, this is one part of the introductory course that we used to call Dancing at the Edge, and now we've shifted the entire orientation of our introductory materials here in Living Resilience. We're calling it Collateral Beauty, and maybe kind of a confusing or an odd shift, and I'm happy to introduce that in one of the other introductory videos in this series. This one is about the stages of awareness. For those who've been around the collapse-aware or collapse-acceptant communities for quite some time, you will probably have heard of a man named Paul Chefurka. And Paul Chefurka is a Canadian blogger and likes to consider himself of the Buddhist persuasion. He's also got a remarkable ability to speak about these remarkably complex issues of the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities in a way that I have found very clarifying and useful. So we're adapting one of his most prominent tools, which is called the stages of awareness. And it really allows someone who's brand new to these conversations as much of a chance to engage and have some clarity as someone who's been around for months or years, or even decades in this conversation. It's a useful tool. So these stages of awareness start with the business as usual paradigm and then take us up through more and more systems awareness, more of an experience of our interrelatedness with each other as human beings, and then also the beyond human population of the planet and with Earth herself. So that's the nature of what you're about to step into, this stages of awareness video. It's also important to mention that this is just meant to be a way to map out this territory, to find a sense of clarity, a sense of being able to share, exchange information and experiences with others on the path. It is not meant to be the territory. It is a map. So we hope you find it useful. I'm also going to be including some more personal videos, video clips in the middle of this introduction to stages of awareness. I hope you find them useful, as I have, to make it a more personal expression of the process that this is, that this reflects. So thank you for joining us here in the Collateral Beauty introductory course here in Living Resilience, in the community space of Living Resilience. Look forward to speaking with you indirectly through these videos, through the 5, what we assume will be about a week each for the 5 sections of this course. And this particular video is in the overview before those 5 sections get going. So wherever you are in the process of being in this introductory course with us, we hope you will stay in touch, really use the built-in social media, very private social media that we've got in this in this Living Resilience community space. And look forward to having chat with you in that space, and perhaps in some of the more advanced work later on. Thanks for joining us. So this particular self-assessment tool is called the stages of awareness. It's roughly based on the contribution of a writer and blogger up in Canada named Paul Chefurka. And so our hats are off to Paul Chefurka for the original idea of this, and we have adapted it somewhat, and we're adapting it some more, so that these stages of awareness as we grow in our ability to see the world as first, the entry level for many people is the level that indicates that what there is to see out in the world is exactly what we have seen since the day we were all born, which is what we call the business as usual paradigm. It's what we all go out to work, and participate in the workforce, and we come home at the end of the day, and many of our lives look very similar to one another, and it consists of many elements that we all call normal. And we should, because that's what we've all grown up with. There's nothing wrong with this business as usual model, with the exception of it is exactly that business as usual model that is clearly causal in both the current and more to come waves of human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems. So here we have the first level of irony. We have no choice, but all of us, to be in the business as usual water, if you so to speak. We're soaked in that water all day, every day. And what the stages of awareness are indicators of is, to what degree are we able to, at least for short periods of time, get ourselves somewhat out of that water, out of that business as usual model. So these business as usual attributes that have gotten us into this trouble, they can be much like water is for a fish. The mythology is that the fish don't know that they're swimming in water. They're so in it, they don't know what it is that they're in. For many, many human beings, that's exactly the case with the business as usual water that we're all swimming in. And it is a very smaller and smaller number of people on the planet, as we go up these levels of awareness to having more and more systemic understanding and ability to see in this world. We'll get to those details. But what I'd like to do is start with playing a video from this video right now is being recorded just a few days after the ending of COP26, which was in Glasgow, Scotland. And by any measure, including the IPCC itself, by every measure, it was a complete and utter failure. And the only thing that could take some of the pressure off of that measure is that really every other COP meeting has been ultimately a failure as well, even the relatively famous one in Paris a few years back. So I'd like to play you a video from within the COP26 environment. And some of our friends over at Facing Future, who are content producers also for the Collapse Aware community, they put together a panel discussion that was hosted by one of the most famous activist voices in the UK, Professor Rupert Reed. And he is his usual articulate self, but really the stars of the show are the other members of the panel, all of them young women from the activist community in various countries around the world. I'll be playing you one of those four panelists and what they have to say. It's a young woman from Turkey. I'm deeply impressed by what she has to offer. It's not just that she's expressing quite honestly just how discouraged and tired she is of this whole process, that the adults around the world, and particularly in her own country, and particularly at the COP26 meetings, there's just no positive news coming from the adults around her. And so it's easy to understand why she could be so discouraged. But she also has an extraordinary ability to communicate what she is seeing is most needed in the face of this discouragement. What is it we need to shift ourselves as a global culture so that we could start caring, so we could start really generating effective action, where the only thing that has happened in these 26 plus years is an ever increasing amount of damage and of our dumping of waste into the atmosphere, causing, of course, these climate change concerns. It's an extraordinary presentation and expression from this young woman. So we'll start with that. Then I'm happy to go into detail about this self-assessment tool from Paul Chefurka and adapted for these times. I'd really invite you to just settle back and really let the communication in from this young woman. It's extraordinary. It's very clear. A unique opportunity to hear from someone who is truly on the front lines of trying to make a difference in the face of quite an apathetic world. So we'll be watching for a few minutes this expression from COP26, and then we'll be coming back for a full detailing of this self-assessment tool for the collapse-aware community that we call stages of awareness.
Our second speaker is Eçem Albayrak. Eçem is an intern with the Human Impacts Institute and an Extinction Rebellion activist in her native Turkey. She's going to speak with us for a few minutes about what that's like, about what that feels like emotionally and what that feels like politically. And she has a few images to accompany her remarks. Eçem.
Thank you. I want to share with you something I wrote during a very difficult time when my country, Turkey, was aflame this summer. And this is my thoughts and feelings. I want to write pages and pages and not say a single word at the same time. Everything feels pointless right now. Honestly, haven't felt this hopeless and stuck in a long time. Selectivism feels pointless, writing this feels pointless, being here feels pointless. But I want to let my feelings out just because I need to let them out. I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. It's becoming a recurring thought inside my head. I don't want to live in this world. Sometimes I don't know how to be in this world. How to have a life, how to dream a future. My brain can't dream me reaching old age lately. It's as hazy as the sky that little child was looking at. The apocalypse I have been mentally nerving myself for is here, but I'm not ready to live it. None of us are. With even the limited amount of news and media I allow myself to follow, I get shaken to my core. Record heat waves, historic flooding, massive wildfires, deaths, war, hatred, suffering. It's like a never-ending nightmare. I'm in a constant emotional exhaustion and want to cry and scream. In my head and mind, I don't know how to stay hopeful when the world is collapsing before my eyes at this accelerating pace. I even often feel guilty for not being able to stay hopeful all the time. beat myself up for not being able to take more action, for spending most of my energy trying to stay sane. The wiser voice in me nudges, "Come on, Eçem, you know despair won't help creating the world you want to live in. It's going to be a long fight, but we can do hard things. Show up even when you're messy and afraid." That voice and the knowing of my heart can dream brighter, hazeless skies. I know there is a better world our hearts know is possible. One with empathy, healing, safety, understanding, harmony, peace, freedom, and love. Right now, I'm trying hard to listen to that knowing, that little voice inside me I can hear when I sit still instead of the stubborn chatters of my mind. Frankly, it is what keeps me here. And I wonder what would happen if we all started listening better. There's this one quote I can't seem to stop thinking about. There comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. What if we all listen to the voice of our hearts? Stop just pulling people out of the river. Stop trying so hard not to fall in ourselves, and went upstream together. What more needs to happen for all of us to start going upstream? This is the question that keeps me awake at night. How can we collectively go to the upstream and make more people open their hearts to the truth and to the pain and the grief? Because we need to sit in the grief. We have to be willing to acknowledge the pain, the painful truth, because if we don't sit in the reality of the issues, we're just going to continue fooling ourselves, and we don't have time for it anymore. I personally choose to channel my grief and despair into action. That's where I find my hope. These are some photos from some of our actions with the Extinction Rebellion in Istanbul. Those are specifically from one funeral march we did for the species that are going extinct because of climate change. The red costume is the Red Rebel Brigades, an artivist troop of Extinction Rebellion, and it symbolizes the common blood that all species share, that unifies and makes us one. And it is really powerful to be walking around on the streets wearing it, because you can see people connecting with it empathetically, and they can understand the message of it. I know what I'm inviting you to do is difficult, opening our hearts to the pain and the grief. It's a deep analysis, and it is painful, but we have to somehow get the strength in ourselves to feel it all. And then we have to find ways to turn it and channel it into action. We first have to feel the pain, and then we have to rise. Thank you.
Eçem, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing yourself here so honestly to us. And I think I can speak for most people in the room when I say that was hard to listen to. Thank you for giving us something that was hard to listen to, that we need to listen to and we need to hear.
Welcome back from Eçem's talk at COP26. One of the main reasons why I've asked you to watch that particular piece of video from the Facing Future team that attends all the COPs and puts out that quality of product is that Eçem is, in addition to being extraordinarily real and vulnerable and powerful within all that, as an activist, as a young woman, as a human being who's concerned about the future of humanity and of the planet itself, she has an extraordinary ability to articulate what she sees are some necessary steps for us to somehow get out of this quagmire, this 26-year-old, and actually older than that, human tendency to completely ignore and instead aggressively amplify the damage that human beings are causing within its business as usual global culture. Words of wisdom from Eçem. So I'd like to introduce to you a model from a friend of the program and a friend of the collapse-aware community named Paul Chefurka, a Canadian blogger who's come up with some quite remarkable ways of looking at and framing our global situation that I find refreshing and useful. So I hope you do too. We've adapted his stages of awareness model to be as useful as possible in these times. So that's what this is about, is perhaps we could use Eçem's presentation as a kind of a way of looking at how to fit into this model. We can first look at who she's speaking with, who she goes home to be with in her culture in Turkey. We could look at the activist community around the world. There are a number of different ways that I think we'll be able to use the communication from Eçem as a way to not only look at the people that we see in the world and see examples of each of the stages of awareness that we're about to talk about, but also look at ourselves and see where we might position ourselves within these stages of awareness. The boldest measure that I know for us to use does not happen to be the one that Eçem has suggested for us. It's the one that we use every day, all of us basically do. In our business as usual world, we get up in the morning and we get off and we're busy and we get off to doing our work and our tasks of the day, and we come home and have whatever we have for meals and so on and so on. And so we have learned before anything else to be well adjusted to this business as usual world. Well, it's quite a few years ago now that Krishnamurti is known to have said, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Hence, one way of helping us see how we're engaged with a sick society is to be able to master this particular self-assessment tool, the stages of awareness. So what these big blocks of color represent are the chunks of the global human population. And they are not to scale, but they're just to represent that by far the greatest number of people in the world, let's call that the big blue block on the left. Those are the people who are going to be involved with what the stages of awareness calls business as usual. That's the end of the spectrum where most of us spend most of our days, no matter how engaged we are in the collapse-aware conversation and community, or how much of an activist we are. This is where we all come home, and this is where we all go to work, and this is where we all do our relationships. This is about all any of us have ever known. So on from here is an extraordinary progression of steps that involves fewer and fewer people at each step. So just remember, business as usual, not only does it involve probably 90% of humanity, if we really put it in proportion, and all of us at some point or another. But it also involves a tremendous number of dynamics, that the kind of dynamics that Eçem is so deeply exhausted from. They're the dynamics that desperately attempt in the background, behind everything, to maintain the status quo. The thing that has us all say, we can't wait for everything to get back to normal during these pandemic times. This is the business as usual world, and this is just a tiny sample of some of the self-sabotaging, shadowy elements at play in the business as usual portion of our world. If by some chance we start to have a refined focus, a narrowed focus, and it's still very much on ourselves as in our world, our business as usual world, this one problem step is one where we realize that there is one problem that's rising to the surface that is very important to us, for our world, and perhaps it well should be. The thing that distinguishes this one problem is that all of a sudden I have enough awareness that I need to focus, that I come out of the kind of amorphous mass of business as usual, just doing the same routine all the time without thinking about a particular problem or something that needs to be solved or something I need to do about anything. One problem is the level at which a person starts to have something that's important enough that they need to focus on that one problem. Let me see if I can get it a little bit more concrete as an example for you, but that's one problem stage of awareness. If indeed most of us or all of us spend the vast majority of our lives saturated in and stuck in the business as usual stage of awareness, what it takes something to get us to shift our awareness, to be kind of shaken enough to become aware of something other than the business as usual model. And I mean no offense. I don't mean to be too casual or offensive. I don't want to be offensive by using this model, this way of talking about this one problem stage of awareness. But there's a boxer in the USA, and I like to jokingly call him a mental health professional when he talks about how sometimes life has its way with us. And we can think we've got it all going on, and then life takes us, shifts us, radically knocks us off center and off track into something completely new. And his way of talking about that is everybody's got a life plan until you get punched in the face. So again, I don't mean that to be offensive in any way for anyone who's gone through any of the remarkable, there's just the devastating extreme weather and extreme disaster events that have become more and more common in these past few years, really driving home the point of just how much human-caused collapse of both Earth and human systems is actually already going on. So what I'm trying to say is any of those extreme weather events or disaster events could be considered that proverbial punch in the face for any of us. It rattles us into at least that we need to put our attention on something that is disastrous. It's really just the first step in this progression, this stages of awareness model. And it is no guarantee that someone then becomes collapse aware, or certainly not collapse acceptant. It just means that, for instance, the people who experienced Superstorm Sandy a few years back, it devastated a certain pocket of the US East Coast. And the community did come together, as you know, all of them got rattled, and they were very clear that they needed to do something about this, recovering themselves from this devastating storm. There was remarkably little, come the reports from people who worked in the disaster relief efforts there. And the same can be said for Katrina down in New Orleans a few years later, and many of these other disasters. The theme becomes get back to normal as soon as possible, to recover ourselves, to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, come together as a community to support one another, to return to business as usual, return to normal. The same could be said for the pandemic. For around the world, communities did their best to return to normal as quickly as possible, with very little attention on systemic changes, lessons that we could learn and then integrate into our recovery efforts. Those were very few and far between. But that's the nature of this one problem stage of awareness, just one notch above business as usual. The next level, of course, implying smaller and smaller numbers of people at every step. That many problems level, I start to realize a couple things here. I start to realize that actually, I don't just have one problem that matters to me. I got a number of problems that matter to me. Some of them are more personal to me, like this job situation, or that I can't seem to get my kids into school in the local neighborhood, and I'm having trouble with the administration and so on. Yes, I can have many different problems that are each one of them quite important to me. But I also just start to nudge into a more systemic view that it's not just me that has problems, but actually there are a lot of people that have problems. So they might have themselves just that one problem, or they might themselves have multiple problems. And chances are I know a few of these people, and we actually meet and we start to resonate with one another because of a similarity with our one or many problems. It isn't until we get way up here into the relatively small orange yellow dot there where we start to see many interrelated systems with problems. This is a big jump. This is perhaps the biggest jump yet. And what this means is that we start to see, oh, I'm actually interrelated with these other people, these other parents that are having trouble with, getting their kids into the same school, or I know a number of people who are out looking for this particular kind of job, and we get together every once in a while and so on. We start to see, well, maybe it's a problem with employment at a larger level, like in this whole community, or this whole region, or in the country. We start to see things systemically. There's an extraordinary jump in understanding of the systemic nature of both human systems and earth systems at this level. This last and smallest part of humanity on the planet that's alive today, a very small number, will get to this level of the stages of awareness, this level of systemic awareness. So it's very similar in many ways to the many interrelated systems with problems level. But this, in that it is really the furthest level, furthest stage of the collapse-aware conversation and community, it's actually allowing and inviting one last layer of systemic awareness, and that is that these are interrelated systems that are also infected, if you will, with interrelated human-caused predicaments, meaning not just the many problems we have, there are plenty of those, and they need solutions. Not just the challenges that we face, and we do need to face them, but the level of predicament, meaning that we've got enough of an accurate understanding of the world. We've done enough research, we've done enough in-depth exploration to be aware of not only the systemic nature of the human systems and the earth systems that we face, that we are an integral part of, but that we also have created, humanity has created a number of predicaments. These are problems and challenges that offer no solutions. Predicaments. So these are the suggestions, slightly adapted from Paul Chefurka's Stages of Awareness. Let's talk just a little bit more about various aspects of these stages, and particularly it could seem daunting when we're looking at this whole thing is problems and then more problems and so on. It can be very daunting to take on an understanding of this model. And I'd like to move to what might be a slightly more encouraging way to approach this, understanding this model, and that is through what are the skills that we might need? What are the resilience skills, the self-regulation and co-regulation skills, the community building skills, the communication skills that we might need at each level of the stages of awareness? This first level is of course, primarily the business as usual level, and of course, the one problem level. And, the way I like to talk about this is that this is with regard to the resilience skills that people usually engage with at this level, these are first aid level resilience skills. Why? Because mostly people have no thought whatsoever of preparing themselves with resilience skills, like they will see in the later stages. So here, an example I like to use also is in a few years back in Texas in the USA, Houston, the city of Houston was deluged by Hurricane Harvey. And Hurricane Harvey deluged Houston and its surrounding area with the most rain that they had ever experienced in the history of recorded events. And there had been zero preparation for anything remotely like this. And so the kind of skills that would be taught here or available here are the kind of skills that many of these people ended up being exposed to literally the day after the storm, where their homes and neighborhoods are flooded. They're sleeping together with 50 other families in the high school gym. And a team of experts can come in and offer teaching about how to take on basic level first aid resilience skills. These are the kind of skills that invite a person who's stressed out. Can you imagine the stress level of particularly the parents? How will we take care of our kids? What are we going to do? We can't sleep in this gym with everybody, and what's going on with our house? It's flooded out, and on and on. The stress level is quite high, and in stress behavior, we tend to disassociate. We tend to be out of our body, not present to our body, not present to our circumstances, to the people and events around us. We check out. So the basic level, first aid level resilience skills here can be taught to, I like to say that these could be taught to an 8-year-old child in one corner of the gym, and they could 10 minutes later walk over to their family and teach those family members these very basic skills. Some of these are not at all going to be a surprise for almost anybody. They're fairly simple, but starting with just the basics of feeling our own body, meaning if we're sitting in a chair, bringing our attention to our rear end sitting on that chair, our feet on the floor, putting our hands on our legs and just gently squeezing around our knees to be able to just feel the pressure of our own contact with our body. So there are many others, and we have entire sections of these first aid level resilience skills on offer here in the introductory sessions of the Living Resilience Deep Academy work. So if this is a level that seems like it might be useful to you, and I suggest that no matter where you put yourself on this scale, from here all the way to the predicament level, there is no level at which these first aid skills won't be useful. These are universally useful and important. So these, more on this later. My strong suggestion is put this one really in your pocket. We will be offering, again, many of these easy to learn first aid level skills. So I would strongly recommend take us up on that offer and get a few of these skills, even though you're a long way from any sort of natural disaster scenario. These are really well worth a few minutes a week of practicing with you and your family. More on that later. This, of course, is equally true in the one problem arena, and it's basically same words are true there, just this one happens to now. Maybe most people will shift at this point. If they've been only in business as usual, they at least will shift to one problem level because they're now in a hurricane-stricken neighborhood and they have at least that one problem, if not, of course, many problems. Let's move on. The next level I call practices for resilience. And the place for practices of resilience is where a person has at least enough systemic awareness to see, oh, there are many problems here. There are many facets to my life and facets to this community, facets to the world. And it would be wise for me to start to see that there are many problems, many situations that require a particular quality of attention from me. And it would be good for me to be practicing my skills, expanding my capacity to be present with those many problems. That's really the core purpose of these practices for resilience, is to expand our capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors. Far more coming soon. And for many of the online self-paced offerings of Deep Academy, we will have a tremendous number of practices for resilience, practices of reconnection, if you will, on offer in many of our later courses. So here in these practices, when a person has expanded their capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors, they can't help but nudge themselves into that next level of many interrelated systems with problems. It's just the nature of, as I expand my ability to see, to see the systemic nature of the human systems, the earth systems around me, and my place within them, I can't help but nudge into that level, and in fact, having some momentum toward that that last interrelated human-caused predicaments level. So let's move on to that level. This is the level, the stage at which we call the resilience skills transformative. Different than just expanding our capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors. The transformative level actually has a tremendous amount of overlap with some of the wisdom traditions from around the world and throughout the millennia that have preceded us here. These wisdom traditions were based on a person coming to a profound level of self-awareness and awareness of the world around us and the universe that surrounds this world. It's a remarkable expansion of awareness. And while for these past millennia, these wisdom traditions have only been available to an extraordinarily rare number of people, small number of people, much smaller than the red dot that you see there implied. It's been a handful by any measure in these past few thousand years, as there have been wisdom traditions to track. Now, what seems to be available to us is many of these wisdom traditions, many of these models of human development are more available now to a sincere practitioner back at that practices for resilience level. You keep expanding your capacity to be present, and it's extraordinarily likely that you will start to nudge your experience into the transformative realm. And what that essentially means is a discontinuous jump in or acceleration of or intensification of or enlarging of our attention or our presence or our engagement with an extraordinary aspect of the world around us, of life itself. What I'm pointing to in this progression is that the extraordinary evolution that's been implied by things like the past 50 years in human evolution of consciousness, of knowledge. It's debatable how much wisdom we've actually attained, but okay. But the extraordinary amount of knowledge and access to important and significant resources that allow a person to experience more of what it is to be a human being and experience new openings to new possibilities, to invent, to come up with ingenious alternatives and possibilities where none was seen before. For sure, this has been at least in the last 200 years, but I would suggest that it's the past 50 years that has seen the most extraordinary expansion of these elements of human consciousness and presence, and possibly we could call it evolution. So I'm asserting that there are transformative resilience practices that human beings can choose to engage with at this time. I would also assert that there is little else available on the planet that stands a chance of reducing the level of suffering, the level of human-caused damage and extinction of species and decimation of habitat and so on, there is little that can promise truly new possibilities of how human systems can operate in a way that includes more and more of the human Earth population. There is little else than this transformative resilience level of experience and presence that can offer us anything resembling what most people are speaking about when they use the word hope. I'm saying that in the full awareness that what I've also posted here at this level on this diagram is the word predicament. That's part of the transformative element, is that it has no attachment to a particular outcome. Where activists tend to engage with this model is back in practices for resilience, where people who are hopeful or people who want to engage with politics or Green New Deals or regenerative agriculture and problem solving, that is such beautiful activity, and I would encourage it absolutely, unabashedly. And where all that occurs is in the practices for resilience level, back in the center, in the blue earth icon. What we're looking at is transformative resilience occurring without any attachment to or regard for any particular outcome for humanity. To give you a sense, if this is a little crazy making, like, what's he talking about? This might inspire some folks to do a little bit of research into many of those wisdom traditions and those extraordinary people who committed their lives to the embodiment of those wisdom traditions. And my sense is it would be only a short time into your research in any of those lives of any of those practitioners, and you would find that they have an extraordinary gift at letting go of particular outcomes. More on that later. So just a bit of a review about the types of resilience available at each level. The first aid level of resilience, I can't stress strongly enough that this is important not just for the average person or 90% of the human population on the planet. It's important for every single person, no matter where they position themselves on the stages of awareness scale. Everybody needs to have some amount of these resilience skills to self-regulate, to co-regulate, in other words, to be able to true ourselves, to return ourselves to a felt sense of center, even when life knocks us off that center. Vitally important skills for everyone. The resilience practices level implies more forethought, means I want to expand my ability to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors so that I might be able to be of service to the people I love, the things that matter most to me in life, to my community, without having resilience practices in my life, practices of reconnection. It's extraordinarily unlikely that I will expand my capacity to be of service to those I love. In fact, chances are without these some sort of practices, the practices that are right for you, the chances are that life will slowly but surely, or perhaps quickly, take down your capacity, reduce your capacity, and leave you exhausted. Transformative level resilience, at best, for most of us, any one of this relatively small number of people who will make their way through the practices of resilience and then up to this level, these are extraordinary skills and capacities. And this is truly where we become of service to those we love. This is where we are able to put what matters most to us out in front of us and be of service to it and them, meaning the people we love the most. And as I mentioned before, ironically, to be able to do this with no attachment to a particular outcome on this planet. While that might sound ironic or even impossible, it is extraordinary to see someone who is activated at this level, the amount of inspiration, the amount of stamina, the amount of life energy, the amount of love that they can call forth from their own body, their own experience, their own presence through their years of practice. I hope that all of us, whether we reach this level for ourselves or not, I hope that all of us can be exposed to some number of folks who have obviously reached this level, whether consciously or not. It's actually quite enchanting to meet someone who clearly is at this level of presence in their life, and they have no conscious awareness of having gotten there. They've done all these practices of resilience and so on without being aware that that's what they were doing. They've more or less stumbled into this level, this transformative level of resilience skills. So here we are. We're done with this layout of the stages of awareness. I'd ask that you please take your time as you finish this up. Take your time to really look into the writing and conversation prompts that come with this video piece, and for you to really give it some time to consider what Eçem's words mean for you. Would you be able to go, as she says, up the river and to explore why are people falling into the river? It is truly a set of remarkably simple yet inspiring suggestions or invitations that Eçem puts out to all of us. Are we able to go up that river and to start to look through the eyes of looking at what's causing these people to fall into the river? What's going on at the causal level? And what she's begging us to do, the adults in the room, supposedly, the adults on Earth, supposedly, she is asking us to walk with her to where we can see more clearly what is causal. Not only 26 years of lackluster performance in the conference of parties meetings of the IPCC, but actually the intensification and acceleration of every measure of our human destruction. Will we be able to walk with her up that river to explore for what are the causal measures that we could attend to with her on such a walk? I thank you for joining us in this introductory film and segment of what will be virtually all of our introductory series will have this piece in it at the beginning. And, I invite you to find the level that is true for you to engage with. There is no right level to be on. The only thing I know is that we are all in the business as usual model or level most of the time. So given that, how can we most empower ourselves and those we love at each of those levels? Look forward to seeing you in the next section of this online learning series from Deep Academy.